Hello, welcome to another Creative Futures session here at Wrexham University. I'm Graeme Park, and today's Creative Futures guest is a British author and curator, best known for her book The Hacienda Threads, which you can see a copy of there, and there's the cover of it there. And this book recounts the history of one of Manchester's most iconic music venues, the Hacienda. Rebecca, or Beccy as I know her, was born and raised in North Wales. She studied at Wrexham School of Art, just down the road from here, before moving to Manchester in the early 90s. And her life became intertwined with the cultural scene of the city, particularly through her marriage to Peter Hook, who's a former guest here at the university. Peter Hook, of course, the legendary bassist of Joy Division and New Order. Now, Hacienda Threads offers an intimate look into the vibrant yet turbulent world of the Hacienda. And take it from me, it was very turbulent. It became a global symbol for the rave culture of the 80s and 90s, and the book features lots of photos and text about the highs and lows of the club, the music, the fashion, the friendships, and the impact it had on the UK's music scene. So please welcome Beccy Hook. A whoop, that's a good start. So Beccy, thank you very much for coming along to talk to our students about your creative journey. It's a bit weird because I've known Beccy for years. And it's funny, like instead of having a drink over a cocktail in a bar in a hotel before a gig or after a gig, it's like proper questions. So first of all, Beccy, welcome to Wrexham University. Can you tell us about your early life in North Wales, because you're a local girl, and how it's influenced your creative journey?
Well, I was always mad about art. I'm dyslexic, so any of the English lit, English slang, I was dreadful with in school. But when it came to art, I just loved it. I excelled. I always felt it was my place.
What, creating it or consuming it? Or both?
Both really, but I've always been creative, so I like putting pen to paper, or I like decorating. Even now I like decorating. I think if it's in your blood, colour and that feel and getting excited about how the aesthetics of things, I think it drives you. It can drive people mad because I like things in certain places, but also it actually,
So was it at primary school or secondary school that you really thought art's for me?
Both.
Excuse me one minute, you carry on talking. I was going to press a button up here.
Oh, no probs. It started from being little, really. I went on to, in secondary school, I was, it was the one thing I didn't have a problem getting an A in. And when I actually moved here, I was the only person who got into the general art and design course after my O-levels. All the rest of the students were A-level students, which was, that in itself was actually quite a challenge, because I was young, you know, and these kids had a few more years on me.
So did you said you had dyslexia, did that affect other academic?
Oh, massive. So it really affected my maths and my English as I was getting older. So when I was young, it wasn't a problem. When I reached 13, 14, when you start things like algebra, etc., teachers would think that I was just being lazy or couldn't be bothered naturally. It was your mind not being able to cope with that type of thing. So when I was 11, 12, I'd be top of the A set for maths. As soon as all pi squared and all that type of stuff, I went straight down.
But tell us about the art school. I mean, because art it's not just painting and making things. Surely there's some type of writing involved as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there was, but but there was a balance. So I think if you can find a way to, what I did learn was less is more. You didn't have to spend ages on your writing. If you were good at something, then you'd excel. So I think it's important to concentrate on what you know you can do.
So what was your speciality? Was it painting or Because they do like all kinds of
Well,
jewellery and crafts.
What happened was big mistake, but there you go. I did general art and design, and I should have done graphics because that's something that I was really good at. And all my friends were doing jewellery, so I did jewellery.
Oh, I see.
So yeah,
but that's peer pressure, though, isn't it? How old were you?
Well, I was having a great time.
How old were you when you went there?
17.
17, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but it was still good. It was still good fun. I've carried on. I've done courses since. I went on to do interior design, and then when I had my daughter, just so that I was doing something creative, I went back and did a diploma in photography, and I did a diploma in multimedia makeup, just so you could just keep going, really, so you didn't become stale.
No, that's interesting, because it's something I tell the students. You should always be learning, and if that means doing courses.
Yeah.
And do you find that, okay, you mentioned photography, you mentioned makeup,
yeah,
all creative, but would you say there were transferable skills from each discipline that
massively, because when you did multimedia makeup, again, a lot of it's all down to balance. So same with photography, but with media makeup you used to have to draw all of the designs that you were going to do, put it onto paper before you put it onto a model. So in that way, it really, all the way through, it was a really good thing to do. I'm so glad I actually did it, you know.
So how many years were you at the art school?
3.
3. And what did you come away with?
A diploma.
A diploma.
Yeah, is it a general art and design?
So what year would that have been, roughly?
Oh, jeez. Well, if you think that I'm 53 now,
okay,
a very
that's
long
not what I was
time
fishing
ago.
for, by the way.
It's all right, I don't mind. I don't mind.
So 17, 20, 20 years, 20, 30, 33 years ago.
Yeah, 33 years ago.
So 1999.
Yeah.
No, 1989.
Yeah. 1989,
1989.
Yeah.
So you got your diploma.
Yeah.
What next? What did you want to do with your diploma?
I wanted to go on and do, become this amazing artist. In reality, a friend of mine was working in London for Harrods, working for their promotional team. So there was 30 of us, and so I went down to London and worked down there.
Right. So is this the first time you left home?
Yeah. Well, no, I was in boarding school from the age of 9.
Oh, right. Okay.
So in reality, I left home at 9.
Right. Okay.
To be honest, but then I went down to London, lived with a load of models down there that were friends. Had a great time, as you can imagine.
This is 1989, I can imagine.
It was really good fun. And then became such a lady, came back up, became an air hostess for a couple of years.
Oh, I always forget you were an air hostess. Which airline, by the way?
Oh, Britannia. Nothing grand.
Right, okay.
Nothing grand.
We've probably got some mutual friends, but that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah,
sorry.
True. And then after that, I got married. Not to Pete.
No.
I got married for a wee while, and then I decided that marriage and North Wales wasn't for me, so I ran up to Manchester.
So what year would that have been?
That would have been 92.
Okay, so 92, the Hacienda's still at its peak.
Yeah. And
but why Manchester?
I had a new boyfriend, and I had a lot of gay friends that I used to go out with in Wales and in Chester, so we decided to move up en masse. We'd started going to dance nights down in Birmingham. We used to go to Money Pennies all the time, and Chuffs and all that. So we decided why not. So we just packed our bags and moved to Manchester.
It is bizarre. It shows you how small a world it is, because obviously I've only really got to know you since you married Hookie, Peter Hook. But based on your story, our paths would have crossed many times.
Many times. Yeah.
Without me actually being introduced or knowing
you were probably like Chuffs. I bet you did.
I would have done Chuffs, Money Pennies.
Yeah.
Obviously the Hacienda.
And the boat trips as well.
So if you went to the Hacienda at its peak,
what
type of impression did that have on you, and what was it like for everyone who was too young to have appreciated what was a very special time?
It was mixed. So I used to go on the Flesh nights. I felt totally immersed in it.
So for those who don't know, Flesh was midweek night.
Yeah, Wednesday nights.
And it was what would be now called the LGBTQ plus night.
Yeah.
But it was like an inclusive, it was known as the gay night, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was really glam. Everybody used to make such an effort. Everybody used to get dressed up. It used to be a month. How often was it?
I think it started off monthly, but I remember towards the end, I think it went more frequent because I used to often pop down there.
But it was really avant-garde. It was wild, absolutely wild, but it was fun. So I used to do Wednesdays, and then we used to go on a Friday and Saturday. Now and again, it was a lot heavier. You know, I remember once being in the queue, and a friend of ours who was manager at the time, a guy called Dave Trainer.
Yes, I know
David got us in. This was a long time before I met Pete. David got us in, and I remember being at the guest list queue, and there was two girls, massive fight in front of me, and I had a white baby doll dress on that had been my mum's, this little Jean Muir thing, and I remember these girls fighting, and there was blood everywhere, and I was just covered in blood, and the bouncer went, "You're not coming in." I was like, "Oh, but I've queued for 3 hours."
Sounds like a piece of art.
Oh, it could have been.
Could have been.
Yeah. So actually, I toddled off to the village, and actually quite enjoyed myself there. So it was fine. But there was that mix of, you know, some nights you felt absolutely fine. Other nights, the actual getting into the house was the hard bit. Once you were in, it was like, we're here, you know. And when you're on the dance floor, looking round and just seeing a sea of faces smiling at you, you just felt home, you know.
Exactly. So obviously this is these stories you're telling now about Manchester in the early 90s and the Hacienda is why you thought you wanted to do this book. Yeah,
because, you know, through, like you guys, what happens is when, through the press and through media and all the different stories, when the Hass is portrayed, it's all the same stories about all the bad bits in a massive way. And then when
that's
we're
a good point,
But when we're all sat there backstage at a classical, and somebody like Roger Sanchez turns up, and you're sat there talking to him, go, "God, do you remember that night? And this happened, and it was fantastic." And whenever we all talk about the Hass, we all talk about it with a smile on the face, and to each other, it's always happy and
exactly.
But when it's portrayed, everyone to a certain point goes, "Oh, do you know?"
Yeah, so just to clarify, when Beccy says the Hass, she's referring to the Hacienda, obviously, affectionately. And it was an amazing period. It's just 88 to the kind of mid-90s. But there were a few issues. The club had to close for 3 months. The late, great Tony Wilson took the decision to close the club because of drugs, guns, and trouble. But that closing it saved it, I think. But Becky's right. The dark side gets reported on and discussed too much, and that's why you came out. Was that one of the main reasons you decided to do the book?
Yeah, because I just wanted to change the narrative a bit, because especially for Pete, because it was towards the end, it was a really sad time for him, because they built this club, they put so much money into it, and obviously, you know, the best way to describe it is if you go out for dinner and you have great meals, 3 great meals, and then you go the 4th time you get food poisoning. You always remember the time that you got food poisoning, not the great meal. And I think it was a little bit like that with him with the Hass, because towards the end, you know, it was really bad. We nearly lost our house. We, you know, trying to sort it out and look after the place, it was really, really hard work. And the fact that we all come together at the classicals and at the nights, and do you know what another reason was? Do you remember that you did a warehouse project night, and it was the first one, and it was all these DJs that hadn't seen each other for years, and it was just like a massive house party backstage.
Correct.
And all the pictures on social media were you guys all together having a marvellous time. And I thought, why can't we just put that to paper? And that's what it did, didn't it? Wasn't it lovely seeing everybody at the launches?
No, exactly. The first Hacienda Warehouse project was pre-pandemic, so it would have been 2018, something like that.
It was probably the second one, wasn't it? That everybody, when it really took off, that everybody was, everybody was there and appreciating each other, and that could have been because of the pandemic.
Yes, probably. And is that when you had the idea to do the book?
Yeah. Well,
so what was the light bulb moment?
Somebody approached Pete and said, we'd like to do a coffee table book. And
what, for all the old ravers want coffee table books?
Yeah. Well, I know. Yeah, but it's true, isn't it?
It's
Why not? And I just thought it's all going to be the same stuff. And we'd been looking through old photos, and you saw all our old friends, and one of my guys that I used to actually work with and go clubbing with was a guy called Howell Davis. He's born and bred in Denby. Now he's the chief principal of Central St Martin's.
Wow. And
there's a picture of me and Howell, and all these different creatives together, and you're going, wow, I looked at the photos and thought, this is what we need, pictures of the people, because you've had your picture taken so many times, and Pete's, and that was the thing, for people to actually get the notoriety they needed, because at the end of the day, you're only as good as your audience. So if you guys had walked into this amazing club and everybody just stood there looking at you, it wouldn't have had the vibe and the feel that it had.
But do you not think there's a difference, like back then, the only cameras you saw were from professional photographers who were booked by the venue, and especially the Hacienda. It was like, because you would get some, quite well-known people in there.
Yeah.
One certain ginger-haired pop star was in there all the time and hated having his picture taken.
Yeah.
But now everyone has got a very good camera. How's that affected how people react, do you think?
I think it's really sad, because everybody now lives through their phones. So if you're watching a gig or you're watching everything, it's true. Everybody. So you've got that other person between you and what you're looking at, what you're playing at. If you go out and have dinner or go out for drinks in somewhere posh, you've got kids that are so busy photographing their food and photographing their drinks when they should be out getting pissed.
Enjoying the moment, It's all about content, isn't it, today?
I think that's the sad thing is, do you know what? Sometimes it's just nice to be ourselves and not worry about. You should be so busy enjoying yourself, you haven't got time to think of your phone.
But do you not think that the benefit of age and experience helps reach that decision? Because if my son's 20, and if you try and have this argument with him, he'll go, your generation shouldn't tell my generation how to live our lives.
Oh, I'm not telling that. This is from personal experience. I was due to go out with Jess, my daughter, a couple of nights ago, and we both had really busy days. She'd had a busy day working, I'd had a busy day working, and we were supposed to go up to the pub for something to eat, and both of us went, we're so tired. And we got a takeaway, and both of us, the way we downed tools and was basically sat opposite each other with our phones, scrolling reels, and we just went, so I get it,
of course,
totally get it, but I just think there's that happy medium, and I'm thinking and hoping that it comes round, because if we'd have had phones and we'd had cameras, when we would have been in a real mess.
We probably might be in prison.
Yeah, well, exactly. Exactly.
So you said Peter Hook gets asked to do a coffee table book.
Yeah.
Now he's only done the foreword. It's your book. So how did take us on that journey from the idea, the proposal, to how did you start producing the book? Editing the book?
So basically what happened was I just got a sheet of people, photographers, artists, promoters, people that used to work at the house, people that were influential in different ways, sat on my yoga mat, because that's my desk, and started ringing people. And the first one I rang was Kevin Cummins.
Mm-hmm.
Now Kevin
Cummins is a very famous photographer.
Yeah, so he did Manchester-based. So he did the Joy Division. You know, the famous photograph over the bridge. If you know Joy Division, he's very, very well known and respected. But Kevin, by his own, he'd agree with it, isn't a pussycat. He isn't the softest of people. So I rang Kevin thinking, oh God, he's going to tell me where to go now. And actually he was brilliant. He said, I've seen what you want to do, and do you know what, Bex, you've got one chance of doing this, so you need to do it properly. There's my agent. She'll go and have a chat with her, and she'll point you in the right direction. So I did. So I met Carrie Kaner, who's his agent, who was absolutely wonderful. She actually said, look, you know enough people that you don't need my help. She said, and she'd already got a couple of publishers that were interested. She'd actually looked around already. So there were 2 different publishers. I met with both of them, and there was one bit that I was missing. There was a Bowie book, and it was done by a publishing house called ACC. And she said, is there any particular book that you want your book to look like? And I went, this one.
Oh, right, okay.
And she said, I actually was the agent on that book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a case of, so she introduced me to the guy at ACC. And he's really great, but Joe Cottingham from Welbeck was somebody that I went, listen, I've never produced a book. I don't know what the hell I'm going on about. This is sort of, and I've always got 1,000 things going on in my head at the same time. So you need somebody who can speak Becky. So I'll start having one conversation, then start on something else if I'm really passionate about it. He was able to go, whoa, rein it in. And actually we got to where we got. It took a long time for people to understand what I needed, and a massive problem was the pixels, when we were getting the photographs, because a lot of them were really, really badly.
Poor quality, basically.
Yeah, and it's such a shame, because some of the pictures that didn't make the
So
book.
what you're saying is, if you try to reproduce them in print, they would have looked rubbish.
Yeah. It just wouldn't work.
Just pass me the book a second. So you basically, it's a proper coffee table book, that. So you had a vision, basically.
Yeah.
But you've never produced a book or published a book in your life.
No.
So were you nervous? Were you worried? Or what challenges did you face?
Well, do you know what? Because, I know it sounds silly, but because I've never done it before, I sort of went, I'm going to have a go. In my mind, it started out in a totally different way. So in my mind, it was going to be a bit more factual. So it started with Linda Sterling, the artist. So the first ever meat dress was actually made.
Meat dress?
Meat dress. So Lady Gaga wore a meat dress. Mm-hmm. Well, it was made in the Hacienda by a lady called Alison Knight, who made it for Linda Sterling for a gig. And she actually was in the basement 2 hours before the gig and made this dress out of bits of meat, so out of chicken legs and all sorts of it. It must have smelled awful, but she actually produced the first one. And Lady Gaga had seen this, and that's why it was reproduced for the MTV Awards.
Why would somebody want to make a dress out of meat then?
I think it was the same idea, women being used as...
Got you. Politics?
Politics. Total politics.
There we go.
Yeah.
You can have a look at this later.
Yeah. But you say I wanted it to be like a scrapbook.
It is like a scrapbook, but it's like a very fancy scrapbook.
Yeah.
So you get a publisher and someone to help you do it. How do you start? How do you decide which pictures to choose? Technology aside, obviously the ones that are pixelated, you can't use. How do you choose the pictures? Did you have too many pictures? How do you choose your contributors? Because there's lots of great text in there as well.
I wanted it, text-wise, I wanted it to be conversations. So I wanted it to run like we are having a chat, because again, if it's an interview, people ask the same questions, so the same answers keep coming through and the same stories. So, and I wanted it to also be different through different artists, you know, artists and authors, producers, all from different creative lives, really. And I think it's worked quite well.
Oh, I think it's worked nicely. So, sorry to ask this, but do you think being married to someone who used to be one of the directors of the club that you're writing about helped open some doors?
Massively. yeah. I'd like to lie, but I'm being totally honest. Yeah, I think it helped, because, to be honest with you, because they immediately know, well, actually, we're there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also creates some form of trust, because, you know, I think that is a big thing. With the Hass, I remember there was a documentary done a couple of years ago that you were interviewed in with Matt, you know, Matt from BBC.
Yes.
And it was a strange one, because if somebody did the Hacienda, you would worry that you were going to be set up, and it would be a documentary about drugs, you know, drugs, and guns and gangsters, and, you know, he said that we'd interview clubbers, and I expected some guy with no teeth rocking in a corner, and it wasn't. It was sort of. I'm
laughing because that's just exactly true.
Yeah. So everybody was with the doc. Everybody was really guarded, and Matt. I've been in touch with Matt, and Matt said, you know, with this, it's opened more doors to do another documentary, because these are the things.
This would make a great documentary, but if you could track down the people with those amazing costumes on.
But we know most of them.
Yes, exactly.
That's the thing, you know.
But obviously you've honestly admitted that being married to Beccy Hook is an advantage. But I've always said to my students, if you have something that gives you an advantage, you need to use that advantage. There's no point in saying, well, I shouldn't really do that. You should always give yourself an advantage over someone who hasn't. I think,
do you know what I've learned is, don't be upset if someone says no. It's like, leave that ego's a word that everybody brandishes at the moment. You know, I sat there and I spoke to people, and I'm not going to mention names, but a lot of them, people said, oh, there's no chance he'll speak to you. He's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And do you know what? There wasn't a single person that didn't help me.
Do you think, though, it would have made a difference if Hookie had asked, a difference if you asking and Hookie asking? People might go, Hookie? No.
Yeah. I think it... Yeah. Because, I do think that there was a difference, because do you know what? It's again that ego. You know, what can happen is, you know, I use analogies, guys. So if you go back if you see the school bully as you're walking down the road and you're 30, you immediately become that 12-year-old person that was bullied. So I'm not saying Pete was a bully, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is that to a certain point, when you go through that journey, or you look back, all of a sudden you become the person you were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And that's probably why we all had such a good time at the warehouse project things, because for that night everybody became 20 again. Yeah. But it works in different ways. But that's the one thing I would say is, do you know what? The worst thing that someone can say to you is no. I think if you actually, approach someone with a smile and actually are really, if you're respectful to them, then I'm sure that's all you can do is ask, you know.
On the subject of Beccy Hook, how did you meet him, and how did you end up being married to him, if you don't mind answering that?
No, I met Pete on a blind date.
What?
Yeah. Do you not know this?
No.
So it was Carlos Buller and Francis Carroll's girlfriend at the time. And basically both of them thought that me and Pete would be perfect.
So a proper
blind date. So actually they organised 3 dates, all of which I cancelled on because I was too busy having a good time, actually.
Okay,
yeah. And on the 3rd date, I was 2 hours late.
Excellent.
And it was funny because it was in a place called the Lime Tree. We went there the other day. It was a place called the Lime with Angie and Ian. And Pete was literally sat waiting for me, and as
he waited 2 hours.
He waited.
He wouldn't wait 2 hours now, would he?
No, we wouldn't wait 5 minutes.
No.
You go, yeah, this is a problem. But yeah, so he waited 2 hours for me, and that was it. Then.
What first impressions of legendary bass guitarist Beccy Hook?
Well, I didn't know who he was.
Oh, really?
No, didn't
Brilliant.
have.
This sounds like a perfect blind date.
Didn't have a clue, and that was probably the best thing, to be honest with you.
It is. I think that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So we went on a boat trip. Actually, Boss Models were doing a boat trip, so we went on a boat trip, and we ended up in Prague 5. Do you remember Prague 5 in Manchester?
In Canal
Yeah,
Street.
and that was it then. Yeah.
And when did you find out who he was, though? And what was your reaction?
I found out ish from Carlos, and by that point I'd met him, so I wasn't really that bothered. I didn't realise how famous he was until there was a big bust up with his ex-wife in a restaurant in town that ended up on the front of all the papers,
tabloids,
the papers. And I remember waking up in the morning and opening the front door, and it was like that scene from Notting Hill, and there was just a sea of photographers. There were photographers on ladders, and I was like, what the hell's going on out there?
That would freak you out.
It was, because I used to go out, her programme used to, Pete was married to Carolina
Hearn, Mrs. Merton.
Fast
show.
But I used to go out on a Friday night, so I didn't used to watch those type of shows, so I honestly didn't realise. Obviously, it was a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
But after that, no, I'm a dance music girl.
Yeah.
And Pete always laughs at me because even now when he does a set, I'll know all the songs, all the words to the songs, but I still don't know the titles.
That's absolutely fine. Only a DJ should know the titles anyway.
Yeah.
So going back to the book, are there any things that you wanted to put in the book, any images or any stories that you weren't allowed to for legal reasons?
No.
And
do you know what? The good thing about the book is that I didn't go to the usual suspects. There was one person that I wanted to have in that should, well, two actually. Alan Erasmus would have been great.
Yeah.
But Alan was in the Ukraine.
Yeah, Alan's one of the former directors of Factory in the Hacienda.
And Pete Saville. And I spoke to Pete, and there were two. Pete did a quote that he thought that the Haas was rising from the ashes like a phoenix, and I said, I don't want that type of quote. I said, I want a proper story. So he told me a proper story, which was really funny, but I promised him faithfully I wouldn't put it in, so I didn't.
Can you share it here?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
No.
Can you tell me later?
I'll tell you later.
Excellent.
But yeah, so that's so
it use advantages to your own game if you can.
But it would have been nice to have got those in. And there was one more. There was a guy called Samson. So Samson was big, beautiful black bouncer who was a fantastic dancer. So he used to work on the door, and one day, you know Samson, don't you?
Yes.
So one day, Samson, Tony Wilson turned around and said, can you go and dance instead because you're so fantastic at dancing? And it's funny, I saw Samson, he came with a guy called Saltz that used to do a lot of dancing last week. Anyway, this one particular night, it was a flesh night, and all the boys were dressed as fairies. And there's a picture of Samson, the face of an absolute angel, all 15 stone of him sat there, dressed in a tutu and a leotard. And it was just the most amazing photo. But again, the quality wasn't good.
Right.
So
I'm surprised technology can't tart these things up these days.
You can't. So Samson came to the gig, not to the gig, the launch. and he's promised to fish it, because he sent it me, you know, through on computer, because a lot of people...
Is he the same build?
No, he isn't now.
Is he thinner?
He's thinner.
Oh, so he'll easily get in it then, bit of alteration.
Well, no, but he's got the original picture.
Oh, he's got the original picture. Oh,
he's
I
got,
see,
so if
right.
I'd have had the original
dress,
yeah, no, so, and the weird thing about it was, when I went back through, you know, there's certain photos that just resonate, and when I went back to find his email, it had gone. Couldn't find his, you know what I'm like with emails though, I'm rubbish.
You are rubbish. Would you say this is an accurate historical snapshot of a particular period in time?
Yeah.
So it deserves its place on the history shelves of a library, yeah, not just the music and
yeah, why not?
And entertainment side.
What do you think? Do you think?
Oh no! Listen, it's brilliant. I mean, I do have a copy which you gave me, and I love just picking it up and flicking through. And there's always something I miss,
yeah.
Because you could, if you wanted to, sit down and read it in, you know, page to page, because there's lots to read, or as I often do, is pick it up and just flick through and then start reading stuff randomly. It works in that kind of order, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, then, why does this book exist? What was the most significant impact of the Hacienda, not just on clubs, but on kind of culture? UK culture, British culture.
I think...
Because that's why this book exists, surely.
Yeah. I think the thing about the Hacienda and Manchester at that time was you didn't have labels, and you know, I'm very un-PC in being PC, if that makes sense. So sometimes I can say something that I don't think would offend, but it's only because we didn't have labels. When you went to the club, you went to meet your friends. It didn't make any difference. Their sex, their colour, their class. Nothing about that was important. If somebody had a look, you know, people would go and spend thousands of pounds on Yamamoto clothes, but then somebody else would have turned up and they would have sprayed their bra and their knickers. And both of them would be looked at in the same vein as, wow, you've got attitude, you've got that way. And it was totally classless. It didn't matter.
But why? Because you're absolutely right. I've had this conversation many times. Up until 88, summer 88,
yeah.
I mean, I started DJing in 84, and society was pretty much tribes of people that stuck together and went to different club nights to hear different types of music.
Yeah.
Then suddenly, summer 88, builders, barristers, nurses, students, the unemployed, teachers, football hooligans.
Yeah.
No violence, no aggro, nobody caring. Why? What was it? And don't say ecstasy.
No, but
which obviously played a part.
Do you know, it did play a part. Having said that, I think you were allowed, all of a sudden you were allowed to go and dance and enjoy yourself. You were in that strange, you were given permission. It's funny because there are a lot of friends that I've found now that used to go to the house and not take drugs. They went and had a great time.
That's another thing. People do talk about drugs a lot, but again...
you know, I'm not... Listen, I wasn't a saint, but what I'm saying is it's a case of that vibe. It was like being... You were swept away with it. You were swept away with that sea of love and excitement and belonging. You know, and as I say, and I keep saying this, you know, everybody feels now that they need a label. And one thing, I went to see my friends and it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered to me was how much we cared about each other, and we were always there for each other. You know, you know, and actually some of the things you saw afterwards, you know, it became so much more. They became your family. These guys now, 30 years on,
it's friends for life as well.
Yeah, massively. You know,
I find when we do the warehouse projects in Manchester, there are faces that are older, but I don't know their names, but I recognise those faces.
Yeah.
And there's that smile across the decks. So do you think the Hacienda's legacy still has an influence today, and if so, why?
I think it's, I think it's a little bit folklore-y in that we all talked about the fabulous time and the great days at home, with our kids. And now if you go to a warehouse project or a Hacienda Classical, half the audience are 18, 20. And I think it's sort of reliving the fantasy, it's actually bringing it all back, and it's actually it's a lovely thing because it's something that families can enjoy together. Like in the old days, what the equivalent of Eris Park, is there Eris Park still in? It's the same thing. Can you imagine going with your parents to a dance night?
Right, my parents came to when I was DJing at the Garage Club in Nottingham. And they came. They wanted. They would stay in. So could we come to your club? And like, oh God, I suppose. And it was embarrassing. And they were like fish out of water. They stuck out like sore thumbs. But fast forward to today, if you see anyone over 40 in a club, so what? Nobody cares.
Yeah,
really.
Nobody cares. But it's that
why
lovely
is that?
mix.
Why have our generation have we decided not to grow up? Why?
Do you know what?
I think it's the influence of what happened then.
Yeah, I think that's massive. I mean, I love the fact that I'll go to a night and Ben's there, Jess is there, my daughter. Ollie Ryder's there. It's like next generation. I suppose in the strangest way, people used to go to church.
I like it, yeah.
But it's true.
Hallelujah.
It's that next generation, and it's actually really nice that we're reliving it, but then they're carrying it on.
So what do you hope people take away from this book, and to the people who were there and the people who weren't there? What do you want them to take away from this book?
A positive vibe. I think it's so nice to know that the other thing that's really important that you find is there were so many creatives there, so many people that went as students, people like Pete Saville and Kevin, Pete, my Pete, you, all of these people that Irvin Welsh, all went as kids, as 17-year-olds. But what was important is they all helped each other. So there wasn't that bridge. It was a case of Pete Saville. The reason that Pete got into graphics is because he wanted to produce record sleeves. That's the reason he started out. One of the guys that helped me on the book, a guy called Ian Griffiths, he's now the creative director of Max Mara. Have you heard of Max Mara?
Fashion house.
Massive fashion house. The reason he was a student in the Toast Rack, a fashion student, 17 years old, and he'd got to the point he didn't think he was any good. He went to the house this one particular night, and Kevin Cummins was again a student, photography student at the time, went over to him and said, "I love your look. Can I photograph you?" Now he'd probably get arrested, but there you go. Anyway, he photographed him at the weekend, and Ian thought, actually, the stuff I produce is okay. It spurred him on to do it. So that was the other thing, was we were all in it together. We were all in it together, and that was part of the family thing. It was and some of these guys have gone on to do incredible stuff.
Do you think though that's because like now everyone's connected? You could be connected with someone you'd never met on the other side of the world, virtually, digitally. But back then, the only way to connect was to get off your backside, go out and go to a place with similar minds. Yeah,
I mean, you can talk the hind leg off a donkey and like photos and see what everybody's doing. But you know what? At the end of the day, there's nothing nicer than a cuddle. And you cannot relive that in any other way than physically. And that's, when you were having a bad time, everyone has down days. Sometimes you don't need to speak to someone. All you need to do is go and give them a cuddle. And that is virtually what I think we need to go back to. I sound like I need
Steady.
to cuddle trees now.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that is so important. It's
But of course, nowadays you'd have to get someone to sign a consent form before you cuddle, wouldn't you?
Yeah, don't let Graeme cuddle you. But no, I think it's really good to connect through here, because obviously you've connected with old faces that you didn't know, or, you know.
So, I mean, you appear very proud of this. I know you are very proud of it, and quite rightly. It's a fantastic book, but you never set out in life to publish a book, did you?
No.
It just happened.
That's another thing. It just happened, and sometimes don't overthink things. Just have a go.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. What advice would you give to these creative media students who want to work in film, television, broadcasting, music? What advice would you give someone who's maybe had a bit of an idea or a vision? What advice would you give them?
God, I think it's good to be passionate about something.
Always.
But don't. There's a difference between passion and obsession, and sometimes it's a hard one to explain. I think you just got to go with it. You know, you've got an idea, go with it. If someone lets you down, there's somebody else that won't, and just keep plugging away. But don't let it. But enjoy it. Enjoy I sound like a creative here. Enjoy the journey.
Exactly. It is about the journey.
But you've got to enjoy it, and you've got to feel passion for it, not fear.
You don't know where the journey is going to take you.
Yeah.
If you'd said to me back in the day that I'd be sat here doing this module as a lecturer, I'd have laughed my head off.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right about that. How important is it for creatives, people who want to work in the creative field, to understand history and context of their field?
I just think you need to go with it, to be honest with you. I don't think, you know, if you look at Pete and my son Jack, both of them are musicians. So Pete can't read music, he's tone deaf. Jack can't read music, he's not tone deaf. But Jack now is the bass player for, have you heard of the Smashing Pumpkins? Yeah. So the Pumpkins, and Pete obviously has done New Order and Beccy Hook and the Light and Joy Division. If he'd gone down that path of I think you need to bring as much passion to the table, and anything you do, you need to do it to the best of your ability. And I think you can't go wrong if you do something to the best of your ability. That's all I can say. But don't be fearful of anything, because you know what, you can do it. As soon as you start feeling feeling the fear, the enjoyment's gone. That's how I feel about everything.
And so says the girl from North Wales who had never had any intention of publishing a book. That's really sound advice. I mean, we can keep this for You can't have it, but you can come and have a look at it over the next few weeks. What's next? Any more books in the pipeline, or what other ideas? Because what else can you curate?
I mean, we've got enough pictures now, and now that people get it, I've got some. I mean,
if you find people have got in touch with you with stuff that you didn't know about?
Yeah, they've all gone, oh, do you know what now? Now that people understand, one, that they're not being set up, because obviously became, everybody went, and, you know, everybody became quite, not territorial, what's the word?
Well, not everyone's an extrovert, are they? Some people perhaps saying, well, I don't want my stuff.
Yeah, but now that they know it's from they go in,
I wish I'd said yes.
Yeah.
So will there be a volume 2?
Well, the publishers want to do a volume 2.
Well, that's publishers for you, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to do a volume 2?
Yeah, I'd like to. I've got.
But it would have to be different, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it would be different conversations. So, you know, it would just carry on, really.
To use a Manchester, Threads.
Yeah.
I quite like Threads because Manchester's very famous for its mills and stuff.
And it's the
Why don't you do a rubbish version and call it Hacienda Bobbins? That's
not a bad idea, actually.
Bobbins being a Manchester expression for rubbish, right?
I think that'd be a good one.
I'll get my coat. What about so that's an up and coming project? So maybe
I think we should do a night. I still say we need to do a night in a country house that's a bit Saltburn without the death.
You mean like the old chuff nights?
Yes, I think we need to do that.
And everyone dresses up.
Yeah, I think we need to bring the glamour back to it and make it that type of night.
So before I open up to questions, foreword by Peter Hook. You said that the original request came to Hookie, right? But
Yeah.
but then you ended up doing it. Did he try and stick his nose in, or did he just let you get on with it? No, I know what he's like, so I have to work with him for Hacienda Classical.
Well, exactly
I
the
know
same
exactly
in
what he's like.
every project. Yeah.
So how do you deal with someone who's going, you know what you should do, or why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Because presumably you had your vision, and this is your vision, you're happy with it.
Yeah.
How do you deal with someone who's trying to
I tended to do it when he wasn't around.
Right, there you go.
So I didn't make a big deal out of it. And so only towards the end it sort of impaired on our time doing other things. So yeah, it was probably the last 2-3 months.
I should try and get some advice from you about how to deal with with Hookie. Does anyone have any questions for Becky? Right, okay, so I'll bring you the mic. If you could just say who you are so that everyone can hear who you are, and then your question, then I'll take that back from you.
Hi, I'm Rob Galloway, and earlier on in the interview you mentioned about some different nights, and then you mentioned about boat trips, and then it kind of moved on. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the boat trips? Because I'd
want to know about them.
Trips.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, no problem. So there used to be a barge that the Chuff Chuff used to have. And it was quite an exclusive thing. So there was only about 100 people. Getting the tickets was really, really
the barge parties.
Yeah, barge parties. So, but the DJs on that, half of the barge parties used to be DJs on a night off, really, or a day off. And then you used to have people like Sasha and Digweed used to. It was so cool. It was like the thing to do. And I think
there's a lot of canals in the West Midlands as well.
Yeah. We could do it up and down Salford Canal. But yeah, it was one of those exclusive nights. But that was actually Chuff Chuff was a Money Pennies thing, not a Hacienda thing.
Yeah, it's a spin-off from Money Pennies, which is a very famous one. I've never been a fan of DJing on a boat because once the boat leaves,
you can't get off.
You can't get off.
I think that was the idea.
Is anyone else? Any other questions from anyone? Can we ask? Rob's got another question.
Oh, no problem.
So another question from Rob. There you go.
Graeme said, and I think it would make an excellent documentary. The whole Hacienda story. Is that something you've ever thought about?
There are documentaries.
Yeah.
I mean, there are documentaries. There's things I've seen online, but I mean.
Yeah, I think it would be nice again to do a documentary with different people.
Different perspective as well.
Different perspective, but
because the BBC recently did a documentary a couple of years ago, which was from a totally different perspective because they didn't interview most of the people that you normally interview.
Yeah.
And I know that
it was good.
The late James got the right hump about it.
Yeah.
But I thought, no, I'm not bothered, James. I think it's good.
Yeah.
And I even got the BBC rang me up to apologise because James had such a go at them. I said, mate, it's fine. I'm not bothered.
Yeah.
But there's a lot. In fact,
you've recently done stuff, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've what?
You've recently done some interviews and stuff, haven't you?
Yeah, we're always doing interviews, but I mean, me and Hookie on BBC
And you know what?
Breakfast.
It's nice because Graeme backstage, we've when he's there with Mike Pickering, the two of them are a double act. And
these days it's like, what was the two characters in the Muppets?
Yeah, they're two chefs.
No, not the two chefs, the two old guys in the balcony.
Yeah, it's true.
Waldorf and...
it is a little bit like that. These days, But when the two of them get together, they bounce off each other and the stories they come up with. And we couldn't get you together. That's one of my conversations. We're having these two together.
That'd be a good podcast. Because the thing about Mike, he's a little bit older than me, but his memory is amazing.
Yeah.
My memory's rubbish until I talk to Mike. And he'll remind me of something that I've forgotten about, and more, and then that's where we get these amazing.
So we could. What would be great, this I'm just putting this out to whoever, is if we did a night that was, we could do a book, but then we could actually sit people down and have various people, the conversations with the same people. So actually, you could have 20 minutes each or 10 minutes each of the two people together, because, as I say, some people gel really, really well together and bounce off each other. Pete and John Cooper Clarke bounced off each other. Fantastic.
Sounds like there's a tour there with just conversations.
Well, if you put a pair of skates on as well, you can do a bit of dancing on ice.
I'd like to get more experience with this documentaries and music interviews.
More experience with documentaries, music. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone? Don't be shy. Yeah. Hang on. Just bring you the mic. Just see who you are, because it's being recorded.
Yeah, my name's Luke.
Hi, Luke.
I was just wondering, because obviously you talk about like not wanting to, wanting to talk about like the more fun and like the good memories with the Hacienda. How do you find that sort of balance? Because obviously it is incredibly notorious for this sort of dark side and the gangs and the, you know, drugs and of course like the sort of infamous, you know,
do you know what
overdose and whatnot.
Do you know what? We didn't see a lot of it.
Thanks.
You know,
No.
if you go to a football match and you're in a certain part of the stadium, there could be all sorts going on with a load of thugs in one part. You don't see it. It doesn't stop your enjoyment of watching that match, and you going home. And it was a little bit like that with the Hass. I trotted in like Looby Loo, totally unaware of all this going on. It was only when I met Pete that I found out about all the nuttiness. I remember once we used to go to a club called Paradise Factory, a gay club, and then afterwards, you know, we used to go to Manto's, which was an after-hours club. And we were upstairs, and just after the Hass had shut, I remember being there with all my gay friends, and these guys walked in, came up the stairs where we were, and started showing their guns from underneath the jackets. And I remember the boys just going, just keep dancing, and we did. And they left. And do you know what? Now, looking back, you're thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that. But then it was in the moment, done, dusted, forgotten.
You're absolutely right. Mike Pickering and I were DJing in a DJ box 20 feet in the air, oblivious to that side of it all. Plus, I never actually lived in Manchester till after the Hacienda closed.
Yeah.
But what sells newspapers? People having a good time and having a hug, or drugs, guns and violence. That's the thing. And so that's why that part of it is very well documented, but I do believe, as Becky said, it's over-egged, over-exaggerated.
I mean, in that way we were fearless.
Exactly, but this book is the real story of what happened, and it's a great thing. Any final questions before I... Yep, we got another question from another Luke. Just say who you are for the video.
Hi, I'm a different Luke.
Different Luke.
Hi, Luke.
I was just wondering, with your book, is most of the photos that you've gotten through it from like your own experience with people, you know, or is some of it like from archives of other people, or archive footage and such, perchance?
Do you know what? It's funny because there's a lot of that Hacienda, as I said, was a big family. Even though a lot of people live in London now, and everybody lives in all different parts of the country, all different parts of the world, but we all used to come together at the Hass. So even though a lot of the photographs were sent in, all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a minute, how do you know such and such, to such and such, to such and such? I mean, it's funny because one of the girls that I lived with in Wrexham here, a girl called Janet Kimber, actually used to run the cloakroom in the Hacienda. And she is best friends with Luke Unabomber's wife-to-be, Amy, etc., etc., etc. So all of a sudden, it's like your paths cross again. So you're looking at these photos going, well, I don't know him, but God, that's such and such a person. So even though to start with they weren't my own photographs, it turned out that I'd say 60% of them, we ended up knowing the people within them.
Yeah, it's 6 degrees of separation, really.
Yeah.
But also, it just reinforces that community spirit of, you know, what started in Manchester, but people from all over the Northwest and North Wales would come to Manchester.
Yeah.
And there's people, for example, I DJ'd at a very swanky private party in south of France last week, and there's half a dozen people there older people who made their home in Manchester. Why? Because they wanted to go to university because of the Hacienda, but ended up staying in the city and being very successful. Any last questions for Becky before I give my
Is there anybody here that wants to do club promotion?
Rob.
So yeah, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I came along with Graham to a couple of nights last year.
Yeah, he's been along to a few of my nights. Yeah.
And stuff. He helped me get some experience, and yeah, just really enjoy it and go around following different artists around here and just helping.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, no. Right. My last question is the same question I ask all our guests.
Okay.
If you could go back to the young Rebecca living in North Wales, what would you say to her?
Ooh.
Bearing in mind, at the start you said you didn't plan on publishing a book, and you didn't know when you were a young girl in North Wales what would happen. What would you say to the young Becky?
That's a hard one.
It is, that's why I ask it.
Yeah, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I think if you're like a teenager and your older self appears and goes, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay," that'd be quite comforting, I think.
Yeah. Well, another thing that was great about that time, it was the first time when I moved up to Manchester, I didn't feel judged. You know, you go through life feeling judged. You walk into any room to a new lot of people, and you always, it's just human nature, you feel that there wasn't any of that, was there? You could walk in, you know what, but it's a real gift to walk into a room and not feel anything but love. That
Brilliant.
is, yeah.
Well, diolch. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back for another Creative Futures very soon, but in the meantime, let's give it up for Beccy Hook.
Oh, thank you.